So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is what I call the evolution of the places we call streets. And a lot of my language around streets is really to start talking about them differently. So I call them places, and I call them a land use. And so the very first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to, because of who's on the call, and you guys are all a little too knowledgeable about this, we've got a couple polls. And so the very next slide, which for some reason isn't advancing, there we go, is I want to ask you guys, what is a street? And instead of picking your answer on this poll, I want you to pick what you think is the most commonly thought answer. Just across, you know, our communities or our culture. Imagine you're walking down the street and taking a survey, this survey, and what you think the most commonly selected answer would be. Okay, very interesting. So part of why I really like to do this is all of these definitions are actual dictionary definitions that I pulled out of dictionary when I first started doing this work. And what I really love about this is that if you know anything about dictionaries, dictionaries show the evolution of language. And so these are all actual definitions you can find in dictionaries, and they're all accurate. But I think the whole point of this poll is to show that that last definition is where we are today. We've arrived at changing how we think of and use our streets. Can I close this, Sarah, or do you close it? And so that's a little bit what we're going to talk about. So in 3 generations or less, depending upon how you're counting, you know, we've changed. Our streets for a very long time were these public spaces, and they were shared. You know, I love the team of horses and the guy on a bike. It's kind of an extreme, but it just really evokes that, you know, we just used them to get around, and we used them to connect. And this is a much more common scene today. And so I'm going to give everybody a bit of an opportunity to, if you have an idea or a response to what changed, raise your hand and Sarah will call on you. I kind of wanted to make today a little interactive, or type it into the chat. What changed in those 3 generations? Do we have anything, Sarah?
Nope. Yeah, cars only.
So one of the things that changed is cars came along. We didn't have cars. I know this for a fact because I use 3 generations because that's true for me. My grandmother went from horse and buggy to first man on the moon. And this what we're looking at here in this photo is more my experience in my lifetime, but even this wasn't always my experience. So the car came along, but other things changed with that. And really what changed was how we think about our streets and that land use, and what is it and what's it for. And so we changed our focus from people to cars. Streets became more and more about cars, a place for cars, a place to put a car. And here's another great example of that transition of, you know, by taking our street and focusing it on the car, our land uses along it even lost a lot of empathy towards humans and lost places for humans.
Deanna, there's another comment that's that I want to share with the group. Is exactly what you're talking about right now. Aaron Bennett says, the places we build our communities farther out, taking up larger spaces, moving outside our local areas.
Yes.
And then Jim Hansen, auto and oil industry drove policy to subsidize auto use. Thanks, Jim.
Well, and in fact, it wasn't just cars. With the advent of cars, we started changing how we thought about our land uses, how we developed and grew. So the sprawl piece that Erin mentioned, we also abandoned transit in many parts of the country. We've been working to get it back, but we literally abandoned it in places. So many of you know the story of the trolley here in Boise that was very successful and went all the way to Caldwell. People could ride around the whole valley and get to places on a trolley, and did. I just like these. So we also really changed our definition of successful design. And I think what really changed in our culture was, as we adopted the car, we changed our idea of mobility and what it meant to be mobile. And that became all about efficiency and convenience and speed. It no longer was really the focus of making sure people could get where they needed to go. And we've lost people along the way. As we know, we've lost those who don't have the same access to cars. And that's a wealth factor. It's so many things that eliminate people's access to mobility. So we began to really redefine mobility. For some reason, my advance is inconsistent. I had this problem before. Sarah, can you help me advance?
No, you're controlling it.
I know, and it won't let me. There we go. It just wasn't. I love this one because here you've got two churches, different places, not extremely different times. This is mostly a different place, different part of the world. You know, you've got this wonderful plaza full of people and things going on. And then here you have this other church that's all about cars. You know, it's empty. There's nothing there except for Sunday or whenever there's some other event. And then people drive in and park their car and go in that building. And it's just such a different statement about this land isn't for people. I mean, that's what it says to me. It just screams, you know, don't come here. It's unfriendly. Who would want to be there? And then I just love these because they're so fun. This is, you know, the despair of what we've created. And I love the combination of those two pictures because it makes that larger statement. The real transition was we quit focusing on people and we started focusing on cars. We quit focusing on mobility and we quit focusing on connection and we started focusing on speed and convenience and efficiency. And what the National Street Service really was about was helping people ask this question: what do we want out of our streets? What we know today is when you design your community around cars, you get cars. And it's sort of a duh, you know, when you hear that. But we've so lost focus that anything else is possible, that we have any choice in this matter, that this is just the way it is. But the fact is that's just not true. And we can design it and get what we want. And so here's a street, and these are the kinds of streets. So all of us have worked on this kind of work where you are right-sizing streets, trying to get our main streets back, repopulating them with eateries. And it's just, you know, that's just a wonderful place. It has people and things going on, and it's dynamic and probably even friendly. So again, National Street Service, one of the statistics I did not know before starting to work with them was that, and this is actually conservative, I use on average 80%. It's actually around 85 for most cities. And the whole point of this is that we no longer think of our streets as public land, but that's what they are. They're public land. We own them, they're public, and they're land. And what we want them to be and how we want to use them really is up to us. And so the other thing I really like to ask people to think about is, okay, we have all this public land, we have this huge public investment. And I like to challenge people to think about, are we getting everything we want out of that investment? So sure, for those of us who are drivers, when we're drivers, it's nice. We get in our car, we get there, it's fast, it's efficient, relatively safe. What else do we get out of that land? Businesses, you know, freight can move around. Any other thoughts of the positives we get from how we use that land today and how we design it today. And I can't see what people are doing, so that's up to you, Sarah.
They're all quietly contemplating.
All right.
Try to think of something.
Let me contemplate. So, you know, some of the conversation, you know, some people freak out. It's like, oh, you know, so the conversation really today isn't about going back to the horse and buggy or making everybody walk, but it's about rethinking it. And here's just one example of a road that got redesigned. Still works fine for its original purpose. You can see that. I suspect it's slower for those vehicles, which is okay if we decide as a culture that speed and convenience aren't more important. And that's just a decision we have. We just have to decide what are our priorities, what matters to us as a community. And, you know, that doesn't mean the freeways are going to slow down. Our freeways, maybe we want to keep our freeways. Actually, the designs that we have in our urban cores and in our cities and on our main streets all came from freeway design. When engineers were given the challenge and the solution back in the 50s of trying to figure out this new thing called motor vehicles and how to help them move quickly, how to help move freight. A huge emphasis was on freight and growing the economy, and how to do that quickly and safely. And so they designed and developed the interstate highway system, which works great. But the intent of that system was never to creep inside towns. It was supposed to stop at the edge of the town. It was supposed to get you to the town, but once you got there, you now went into a local network of streets, which meant you went slower. Maybe it wasn't as convenient. You had to deliver your goods. You had to go, you know, you were going to visit your friends, whatever you were doing, going home. And we lived that way for some time, and we were okay with it. But we then decided that worked so well, we started creeping those designs of speed and efficiency and convenience. And we forgot, I think, as a culture, what we want out of our streets. So I just think looking at this, you know, one has no people on it. Granted, one is in the summer and one is in the winter, so that may not be fair. But the other one does have a place for people to bike, and they are using it. The one on the left obviously doesn't. So I'm not going to take up much more of your time. I'm going to lead you into what Sarah's going to talk about. But as we do that, we're going to do two more polls. The first one is about a favorite street, and you can select all the elements that you see. There's more. I can't list them all, but all the elements you see there that to you, just close your eyes and imagine a favorite street anywhere, somewhere you've been, maybe your neighborhood, and then pick all the things that are on that street that you see in this list. So, you know, if you really look carefully at this, what you see are the elements that are about people. You like it because you like being there. You're a human, and it's a human scaled street. Those are all things that make a street more human scaled. And so what we found working with the National Street Service Project was this is really common. People know this intuitively. We've forgotten it, but we know it when we're asked it in these ways. So now we're going to take another poll. And now we're going to ask you to do the exact same thing, but think of a street you don't like and select the elements on that street. So all the non-human elements, the things that serve that fast, efficient, convenient. So I'll let you close that. So the real question is, if we know what we want and like in our streets, why do we keep building the opposite? And it's because of that paradigm shift and that culture shift I talked about. But I think it's also very much about a fear of change. So we've forgotten that just, 50, 60, 70 years ago, what we consider normal today, there's no normal about it. It's just kind of a decision we all agreed on, whether we knew we agreed on it or not. So the way I like to help people think about this and talk about it is every street's not the same. We can still keep some level of speed and efficiency and convenience where we decide it belongs. And then we can take our other land uses that are streets and turn them into what we want in those places. What do we want in our downtown? What do we want on our main street? What do we want in our neighborhoods? And that's really what the National Street Service was all about, is just creating, what is a true network? And if we can create that true network, we can get back to true mobility and true connection, which in my opinion is what streets really are about. They're about mobility and connection. They weren't necessarily meant to be about speed and convenience. It's just a very different way to think about streets. And so this is my last slide, and I stole this from Gary Toth from Project for Public Places, and I love this because I just think this is obviously not even on our continent, it's somewhere in Europe, but it could be here if we wanted it to be here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. I'll stop sharing my screen. And Sarah's going to share a little bit about her experience doing something the National Street Service calls soul searching.
So let me first grab the link here in case any of you guys want to take a peek at it. I'm hoping that it'll let me share a live link in the chat. So we'll see if that works. Oh, good, it does. So feel free to go and look for yourself and peruse through the, sorry, I can't do two things at once. Peruse through the soul searching guide that I'm going to be talking about. And let me see if I can share my screen here. There we go. Okay, so everybody see that okay? Okay, so I was one of the National Street Service Street Rangers is what they called us. And I'm gonna talk about, I see Deborah laughing. It was a funny name, but it was more appropriate when they moved to Texas, I thought, Street Rangers. But so yeah, one of the main pieces of the National Street Service was this soul searching guide that they gave us. I kind of took a picture there on the right of like the smattering of goodies that they gave us. But the biggest piece of it was this book that they've now turned into an online guide that anyone can go and use. And so the first piece of it, I guess I would kind of sum it up as observation and reflection. And that really talks about kind of what Deanna was getting into. It's the idea that, we use these streets every day, but do we ever really just stop and kind of ask ourselves questions about this space that we have all around us? And so the one thing that I thought would be really fun, as we're all, maybe some of us more than others, are at home and kind of have more time to sort of explore and do things, that it might be a cool resource for people to use, the guidebook, and then just to go on this walk, this guided reflection. It's actually a podcast that you listen to, and they walk you through the process. You go through walking very quickly down a road, and then you walk really, really slowly down a road, and then you kind of walk at a comfortable pace. And the whole time that you're doing it, you're thinking about these questions that they're prompting you with about, are there interesting things to look at? Are there places to sit? Do you see other people? How are people interacting with you? Are they interacting with you? So it's just really an opportunity to think about those questions that you maybe don't typically think about on a day-to-day basis. The next piece of it was something that I really loved, and it's that idea of, maybe I'm like too juju or whatnot, but the gratitude journals that are like really hip, you know, where it kind of makes you think about something that you appreciate, and it sort of can flip your mind to focus on the good. I think that's a good thing for all of us right now, if we can sort of step back and focus on the good. And so, you know, for this case, they actually gave us these little cards, and I use them to write love letters to my neighborhood. So this is a street in my neighborhood. I live in the Collister neighborhood, and I loved this street when I found our house before I even knew anything about why I loved this street. And then going through the street service really made me recognize that one of the things that I love so much about our neighborhood is that when you drive in, the street is lined with trees and it's separated sidewalks. And so that was the love letter that I wrote to my neighborhood. I actually even wrote a postcard to the Planning and Zoning Commission to tell them that I loved that about our street. This is another thing that I really love about our street. You go over a canal when you come into our neighborhood, and it's always full of baby ducks and baby geese. And one of the pieces that I'll get to next is that you do as a part of the soul searching is to actually interview your neighbors. And I have 2 little kids, and so I took them with me on this soul searching journey the whole time, and they just got such a kick out of it. They loved it. They thought I was a nerdy little sidewalk lover, and I'm happy to have that title. And so I interviewed my daughter for one of them, and she said that she loved the ducks. That was one of the things that she loved seeing out on the streets and in our neighborhood. And I can't blame her. I think it's really fun to connect with nature in any opportunity that you have. So that was sort of one of my other favorite pieces that I really enjoyed about the soul searching guide that I thought was relevant to our current pandemic state, is to sort of shift the focus back to the positive, and find the things about the space around you, whether it's your street, your front yard, your neighborhood as a bigger picture, and focus on bringing attention to those wonderful little things that you enjoy. So then the next step of the soul searching is really where so the first piece, you're kind of being very insular and looking at yourself and how you're experiencing things. But obviously we live in a community of people. And so to really be able to take action, you have to ask, you know, and listen, you know, what are those things that you feel? What do you feel when you're going outside your house? And so one of the things that we did, this is me with my kiddos, is we set up a little pop-up story park. So we sat in a couple of different places around our neighborhood. And, you know, it helps that I have little cute sidekicks. So we just sat, this is the street corner where the canal is, and we just sat there and waved at all the cars going by, and everyone was very curious what we were doing. I think were expecting us to be selling lemonade or something, but being the street ranger kind of gave me that permission that I needed to feel confident and comfortable to go and interact with people that I maybe wouldn't have felt that way before. And so I really just sat out on the street corner and said, hey, I want to hear about what you think about our neighborhood. What do you like? Tell me a story about a street. I remember sitting at this corner and a lady was jogging by and she was like, oh, tell me what's going on here. And I said, tell me a story about this street. And she said that she was 9 months pregnant, walking down the canal with her daughter with her, and they were feeding the birds and her water broke. And I was like, what a great story. Like, you're just out there feeding ducks and then you're having a kid. But another great story that came out of it was I found out, so this is a map of my neighborhood. I found out, and if you look North Collister, I wonder if I have a little pointer. Here we go. So this is North Collister, and it's a very busy road. And I live over here. And so I have to come down John's Landing, which is that beautiful wooded street. And then I have to go on this busy road that has no sidewalks, and it's really not fun. And I don't feel safe with my kids. And so one of the canal, let's see, I was sitting right here for that other picture. The next place that I sat was right down here at the corner of Collister and Catalpa. And a neighbor was out jogging, and she said, hey, I've seen you, and I was asking for stories, you know, and she said, hey, I've seen you with your kids going down Collister. Do you know that there's a back way for you to get to the park? And I was like, you know, I lived there for like 3 years. And I was like, no, I had no idea. So come to find out, if you go down this little side street up here, right back over here is a cut through that leads to the park, but also to Collister Elementary. And I had no idea that that existed. And so for the next step in the project, right, we've now listened. So now it's time to take action. So my next piece that I did for this was, I did this little project. Let me turn off my little pointer. So I did this little project on Collister where I basically just drew some attention to those micro routes that I had found. That's what I called them. I don't know if that's what they're called, but and I just wanted to show people that there were ways in our neighborhood to get around safely and in a fun way with your kids, where you can kind of let them roam around and explore, which is one of the things I love to do with my little munchkins. And then, of course, because I'm all about having fun, I added fun elements to it. Again, like I said, my kids went with me this whole time. So Roxy helped me with all the sidewalk chalk that you see. And so we made it as like a little scavenger hunt. So you can see kind of on the fence there is a little Ziploc baggie hanging. And that walked them through that one path that went back to Catalpa Park. And asked them, there was a map next to it on the little pink, there was a map with stars, so they could put any other micro routes that they knew about in the neighborhood. And then it just was a fun little path that said, you know, like hop 10 times and spin in a circle and all this kind of stuff. Just a fun little way to get kids interacting and having fun with the journey. So this is where I have my little notes. Now let me pull my little notes out. So for me, what I would say, the main takeaways, definitely, I was interacting with the other lead, not Deanna. I was interacting with Casey, who you can see in the upper left of that picture. But I remember being so fearful of doing that project on Collister. I was afraid that I would make someone upset, or that I'd get in trouble for spray painting the street or chalking the sidewalk. And I remember I was out there with my daughter, which again is so nice to have that like buffer of a kid. I was out there spraying the street with stars, and a police officer drove by, and he drove by twice. And I was so scared. My heart was pounding like crazy, and he just drove off. He just wanted to, I guess, make sure I wasn't doing anything mischievous. I don't know, but you know, just that idea that what the street service gave me was that feeling of permission. Like I had a reason to be out talking to my neighbors and trying to go and do these fun things. Of course, when it was done, I heard from my neighbors, the street service volunteers said I was very lucky that the first comment I got on Nextdoor was a positive one, because once you're going down the positive direction, it tends to stay that way. But everyone, it was really well received. Everyone was really hoping that they could see this more long-term, to see a micro route map, or other things like that. So of course it was well received, but it was just overcoming that fear and just starting to take action. And of course I did go ask, you know, the people that had the fence, and I, you know, shared it on Nextdoor, and I tried to be proactive about communicating, but then just letting that fear go. And then the other thing about that I took away from this, I like to say, you know, the phrase, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And so to Deanna's point about how, you know, we have sort of over time, our streets have become this thing that maybe is sort of disconnected from what we want, but we can't turn it like a light switch and go the other direction. It's going to take these tiny little baby steps to get us where we want to go. And so incrementalism has to be okay. You know, we take it as we can, one piece at a time, and hopefully, you know, start the dialogue and allow people to experience something different, something that they never would have thought that they knew that they were missing. Like, you don't know that it's something that you want until you can go and experience it. And then you say, oh, I actually really like that. And then of course, you know, getting out and meeting your neighbors and listening and asking questions. And that's how we slice away at that elephant. And then the last thing I'll say, sort of like what Deanna was saying about connections, I look at this in two ways. So as we're going into this pandemic, sometimes it can feel really isolating. So it's a way to connect both with personally, with people, but also how can we connect to other advocates. You know, that's who's on this call right now. So just knowing that Deborah will probably get a kick out of this. We liked the street service volunteers called it the bat signal. So whenever you have, you know, something that you want to put together, or something that you want to do, or a project that you're feeling insecure about, you know, throw up that bat signal and find your other advocates that can come and give you that boost to take that step. So it's connections in two ways, connecting with your neighbors. And these are sort of my tips of how to get started with connections with your neighbors. It's really what I've seen more and more is just finding a reason to be outside as often as possible, where you can bump into people. I think a lot of, obviously not the people on this call, I'm betting, but you know, a lot of people in my neighborhood, they just pull into their garage, shut the door, and you don't see them. So it really takes dedicated effort to be as present as possible, to have the opportunity to get to know them and show them what you think things should be and how you think things should be different. So that is all I have to say about that, and I will stop talking now. But I will say that I want to introduce Deborah, who's going to talk about, so she was a fellow street ranger, and she is now doing all sorts of wonderful things over at the Central Rim. She shared some of it with me. Let me pull it up for you, Deborah. I have it in no particular order, so if I have it the wrong way for you, feel free to tell me to go to another slide.
Hey, Sarah, while you're doing that, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did anybody mark anything on your map that you had up on that fence?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Which is fine.
And I've since found more, so it's interesting. I guess, I don't know, they're hard to find or something.
No doubt. That was really interesting. Thank you.
So let's see if I can make this work now. Can you guys all see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this.
Cynthia, I think while we're waiting for this, I think that's a great question. And we had almost 25 people out doing these things for a couple of months. And the people and there were a lot of interactive things. And what we found were the people who could kind of stay there and encourage people. So I think it gets back to that permission thing. And the fact that we've forgotten our streets are public. We don't own them anymore. We don't even think of them as ours. We've given all that permission away. We're fearful to do anything there. So I wouldn't be surprised that there were some people who stopped and looked and read and thought, I kind of want to, but I'm not really sure I should. So.
I agree, Deanna. I think people just need some nudging, and we keep forgetting that we're on the leading edge of this. So to us, it's perfectly normal, but I think to a lot of people, it's not. And so they're trying to figure it out. So good point. Thanks. Deborah?
Yeah, I'm talking here from the Central Rim Neighborhood Association. What our goal was when the pandemic took hold of our city and everything shut down, and is to reach specifically the people that are not so connected, that are not on Zoom, that are not constantly on social media. And so we had the idea to have flyers hanging throughout the neighborhood, that people that are walking around see the flyers. And this flyer here, I made this collage, and when you look closely, you will see the people waving. And I decided to make a collage with people waving because this was something that happened right away. As soon as everything shut down, people started to walk on the streets and bike on the streets and keep the distance, but everybody waved. You know, it was something, a sudden change of protocol, of breeding protocol. And I thought it is, by showing everybody waving, I wanted to show the people that the experience is the same. And everybody in the neighborhood is realizing everything is changing, and we have to change, we have to adapt. We can only wave from far away. And so that's why I picked this motif, the children waving. And yeah, I thought that make it perhaps more aware for people that we adapt. We are not alone in this. We adapt together. Yeah. So that's why I had this on the, and the next one. I will look only to the one on the left side. The one on the left side is, I put this together with the collage. And my think again was, how can we reach those who are the most isolated, that don't have any access to nothing? And so I asked the neighbors, if you know of somebody who has no access to resources, and so please share this information. And the information that I shared with the neighborhood is the self-rescue manual that the Boise School District has put together. And when you look at this manual, everything that you might want to find, you will find in this manual. Legal help, help for clothes and food and whatever you need. So I wanted the people in the neighborhood to be aware this is available. These are resources you can recommend to your neighbor if you know that they are in trouble. The other thing I also pointed to next door, because there was a map where everybody who wanted to help the neighbors could write on the map on next door, I would like to help you with pets. If you cannot leave the house, I can walk your pets, or I can go to the grocery store for you. So that's another link that I put here. And I hope that people were able to share this with neighbors in need. The other second part of these flyers was about how can we connect the people that are inside the houses with the people that are on the streets. And so we discussed these different ideas at the neighborhood president meetings, and there came up the idea of the teddy bears so that the kids can bear hunt. So this is a suggestion that we put out in this flyer, asking people, can you please put a bear on the windows, and also decorate your windows. This was an attempt to connect people that are inside the house, looking out to the street, seeing the kids walking by and recognizing their bear. You know, I thought this is a way to get people out of isolation, especially elderly people or people with that really don't dare to go out of the house. And Sarah, could you please show the bears? The one with the bears. Yes. Yeah. Please look only to the one on the left side. These are the bears that were hanging in our out that you could see in our neighborhood, and also people decorated windows. And the other one. Yeah, this one. And this I put out on next door, thanking the neighborhood for their generosity and their willingness to contribute to the neighborhood. That's why I made this collage, to thank the neighborhood for their contribution. Yes, and then when I heard that downtown, the restaurants, that's another, can you please show the ones? Yes. See, this ones. When I heard that downtown, the restaurants are opening up towards the streets, that they are having outside sitting areas, I wonder how can I communicate that to the restaurants in our neighborhood. And so I went and visited the restaurants that we have, and I talked with them that there is this opportunity. You can also sit outside if you feel more comfortable, and your customers feel more comfortable, and that downtown they are doing this. And I just talked with them, and I asked, how are you doing, and are you open to regular hours, and after I talked with them, I put this together here, things to do in our neighborhood. And I listed all the restaurants, the stores, and entertainment and activities that you can do in our neighborhood. And the idea was, again, to get people out of isolation, of help them realize something, what is happening. It is open. You can go to the climbing gym. You can go to a bowling alley. It's just to make people more secure about the next stores and businesses that are right around our neighborhood. I think there were many questions, and this was an attempt to make people aware things are opening up, and you can support your businesses, and you can, you know, it's just, so I posted that also. Yeah, that is what we did in our neighborhood related to COVID-19. These are the things that we did, yeah. Perhaps the one with the murals, if somebody is interested. Yeah, this is a longer process. We would like to improve this wall here. You can see from the connector, and you can see when you go down to the green belt, from the bench down on Garden Street to the green belt, you see this wall. And many people in the neighborhood said they would like to see a mural there. We organized a call to artists. We had an election during National Night Out, and this was the one, this lower mural is the one that people picked. And we got the consent from Idaho Transportation Department that we can add a mural there, and we will continue working with them as soon as we have the money for it. So we are doing the fundraising right now, and it's just another thing that our neighborhood is doing. Yeah, our neighborhood association. Yeah, just a few things. Yeah.
Deborah, you're doing that as a fundraiser. Is there a way for us to give you some money for that? And how much more do you need?
We have the connector mural. It's called Connector Mural, and it is on GoFundMe. Okay. And we are also applying for grants, and we got a grant from Idaho Commission on the Arts, but it is far not enough. And we are continuing. But the thing with grant right now is that so many people are asking for grants because of COVID-19. So,
Deborah, are you working with the neighborhood association? Because you could, that one would, I believe, would qualify for a neighborhood reinvestment grant.
Yes.
And the city's arts and history department would be really interested in it.
Okay, thank you. I will. Yeah, we have a board meeting again on Thursday tomorrow, and we will talk about this. Who from us want to do this grant? Yeah, thank you.
Let me know if I can be helpful.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
You bet.
Yeah. So these were just things that because when COVID-19 came, we were, of course, what can we do? What can we do? And we thought the streets it's a public space, and you can reach people by hanging up stuff on the street. And I saw neighbors taking pictures of the information. And I thought people just were like, okay, it's helpful to know that there is this self-help manual and stuff like that. I think people really took the time, and you could see the bears. So we could reach people just by having signs out. Yeah. Yep.
That's great. Thank you so much, Deborah, for your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
We have 10 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Or anything that they would like to share, anything that they've done in their neighborhoods during COVID where they've become more connected to their neighbors in their neighborhood?
Well, I was just going to share that I've seen a whole lot more people out and about and talking to each other and smiling at each other. It was interesting, both Sarah and Deborah's presentation talked about that, just being out and what that does. And I think we're in a moment when that's beginning to change.
Good point. We've been noticing gangs of kids riding bikes in our neighborhood like we've never seen before. There's this one group of about 8, they're probably junior high school boys, and they've been out every night popping wheelies down our street and stuff. So it's been really fun. I would like to show some pictures that kind of document my experience so far with this. I have a few pictures. I'm going to try to do this for all of you.
That's great.
Can you guys...
My granddaughters have been riding past your house all the way from Southeast Boise about 3 times a week.
Awesome. That's great. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
One thing that we do normally anyway is sit in the front yard, but we've been really making the big effort to sit in the front yard because we want to feel connected, because we're not going into our offices and we're not going into stores and stuff. And we're extroverts. So we need that connection. And so I've been trying to take as many pictures as people will let me take, which isn't everybody, but this is Dave, and he just had knee surgery and his doctor told him to get out and walk. And we've met 3 gentlemen who've had surgeries and they walk in our neighborhood all the time. There's Dave, Paul, and Don from Montana now. So it's been really fun to meet these guys. And this was on a weekday in the middle of the day. I was sitting in my house working and I saw this group. They were laughing and talking and I ran out and took their picture. They were just walking down the middle of the street without a care in the world in the middle of the day. It was great. And this is on 8th Street. I don't know if any of you have been on 8th Street. It's a collector. It gets a ton of cars and they go way too fast. And this is Amy, she and her little daughter, they live on 8th Street. And they just were out riding their bikes one day, enjoying it. And there's not a car in sight. And then these are my neighbors. They have goats, which I didn't know about. They were out walking their goats one day. One's named Carl. I can't remember the other goat's name. And so I ran out and got a picture of the 2 goats. They just live a block away. Now every time when we walk by, they talk to us. And this was one day I was in my house working and I heard horses and I ran out and they were trotting. So I missed them in front of my house. So I told Jim, get in the car. We have to go follow the horses. And we finally caught them. This is on 15th Street. So it's about a half a mile from my house. They're up north of Bogus Basin Road or Hill Road. And I wasn't completely sure where they were going. The mother's actually riding a bike and leading the horse in the front. And then these 2 little kids were on these horses. It was so great to see. And then this is Radio Boise. They have been broadcasting. Their DJs have been working out of their houses. We were on a bike ride one Saturday and we came home and these guys were out there and there's great music playing. And we didn't even know the neighbor. And now we're great friends with him. And they broadcast every Saturday from 1 to 3 from his front porch. And we feel really lucky that we get to experience that. And meanwhile, this is what Chinden has looked like. This is 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Not many cars in sight. So those are my COVID stories so far that I wanted to share with everybody. That's all I have. Anybody else?
Yeah, Cynthia, I just kind of want, for me, what National Street Service really helped me finally, I guess, put together in my own work. I've been working on walking and biking for a while, and then I started probably 4 or 5 years into that, really focusing on placemaking. And for me, the 2 just continued to blend. And what I loved about the National Street Service is it really helped me finally really understand why I see the work as the same. And that is this notion that our streets are public land, they're public spaces. And, I think in this time, I'm hoping this silver linings thing that you and I started talking about before you started doing it, is I'm hoping we need to find ways to help people hang on to some of this. People have experienced, and to help us turn the corner and reframe the conversation about our public streets and what do we want out of them. And too often people feel like they're going to lose something. It's going to take me, 2 minutes longer to get to work, or it's going to, whatever. And talk more about what we're all going to get. And, the headquarters for National Street Service is in San Francisco. So I went there a number of times, and being in a place, especially like that, just was such a reminder of how, the streets are our one public space where everybody's going to encounter everybody. And I fundamentally have come to believe that it's one of the roles that have led to our divide as a nation. We no longer have to interact in the streets. You know, it's the place I might run into somebody who's homeless. I might, you know, somebody really different from me, somebody who's, you know, just totally different from me, because it's there for everybody and everybody uses them. And when we made it easier through the automobile, when we made the streets less human centric and people didn't want to be on them, we reduced those interactions, and those people different from us were allowed to be over somewhere behind a dark screen, and we could pretend they weren't there, and they could pretend I wasn't there. And I really, I would share that with folks at the National Street Service. And I think sometimes they thought I was a little bonkers, but I really believe it is one of the community designs that has led to our breaking down as a community and as a society. And so I hope we can use this time to capture remembering, you know, what it's like to connect with your neighborhood, with stuff like what Deborah's doing and what Sarah was doing, what all the street rangers were doing. It's just about human connection. At the end of the day, whether we want to use that public land to stay connected and have happy, healthy, vibrant communities, or just let them be part of something a car can use.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm sure all of us agree with you, Deanna. And it would be great to sit around one day and brainstorm about how do we keep this, you know, how do we make sure that we have a piece of this piece that we've had and take it forward with us after things go back to normal, whatever normal is, right?
One thing I'd suggest is to constantly interrupt the dominant paradigm, because the way you describe it, Deanna, is not the dominant view. And so, you know, I've seen it in the commission. I remember distinctly not too long ago, somebody testifying referenced about how their children played a football game or something, toss in the street, and they were concerned about cars, and they were reprimanded by one of the commissioners. You shouldn't play in the street. You know, this is their neighborhood. No one but me called her on it. And I think the entire audience didn't reinforce. So it's like, okay, hers is the dominant. Yeah, that's still the dominant paradigm. And so we have to actually actively make people uncomfortable and say, no, that's not right. And you have to interrupt it. And then say, no, that's not the way they're set up. And, but unfortunately, I think people largely feel powerless. It's like, oh, well, whenever the street's going to be repaired, it'll be repaired, and they'll do stuff for cars, but has nothing to do with me living and playing and bringing my goats on the street. So I think one thing we can do to get to constantly challenge that dominant frame.
I don't know if everyone else is seeing Erin's chat, but she's wrote a great, it says, a local church in my neighborhood has food trucks and physically distanced picnic tables for everyone to walk down and have a dinner a few nights a week. And the kids have done sidewalk art all around the seating area. Very fun and a good chance. I mean, it's just a great story. Thanks for sharing that, Erin.
Yeah. My mom lives on a private street, and kids are playing on that private street all the time. And they put things out in the street and nobody seems to question it. And mom, who uses a walker, is able to walk down that street. And when people drive to come home, they basically slow to her pace until they can get around her, and usually so they can talk to her. So it's like in the private streets, there's a greater sense that the street belongs to the families who live there.
I will say, I think during this coronavirus thing, I have felt more assertive. I remember, Deanna, when you came out to talk with me about that Collister project, you were like, yeah, I don't care. I'll take my right of way. And you were just like blazing into the road. And I was just like, oh. But I feel like with coronavirus, you know, because of the whole distancing thing that is now encouraged upon us, and the sidewalks in my neighborhood, we have those little mailboxes that jut up and kind of force you over anyways. And it's too narrow to walk with two people, even if you're, you know, even if you like each other. So, you know, like right away, I found myself walking in the street. That like took no time for me to just make that transition to, okay, this is a space that's available and it's wide and I'm going to use it.
Is there some stencils we can sneak out in the middle of the night and put "This street belongs to all people" and slow down and put some like kind of like guerrilla art out there?
Well, we do have, I should have put this in my slideshow. You know, one of the projects that one of our volunteers did was the Boise public street sign that looks like a National Forest Service sign. And it says Boise Public Streets, Land of Many Uses. And we have 4 of these huge signs. So if anybody wants to put one out in their neighborhood, it's a great message. I mean, I think Cynthia and I have been talking more and more about, how can we get people to just do these little guerrilla things? Just go out and do them and take that permission.
Deanna, I must say, I asked my neighborhood board, you know, and because I wanted to put this sign, it's my favorite thing, the sign that we have. And they said, no, then we have suddenly a lot of camping people with their camping in our streets, and we don't want that. And I was so bummed. I was like, oh my God, my favorite sign is not, I couldn't do, I was one against the rest, you know. But
what's wrong with camping, right? Right, Cynthia? Didn't you say you love the RV that's parked on your road because it slows everybody down?
We have 2 RVs and 1 huge pontoon boat parked on our street now because these kids have come home or whatever. Oh my God, we love it. They slow down so much in front of our house. We love it. We hope they never leave.
Yeah. Well,
that's the old theory of David Engwich. He always said, you know, put stuff out in the road. And on Northview, when it was such a big deal, you know, 12 years ago, this older couple who came and they were really reticent and they didn't quite believe it. And so we talked to them and they said, well, you know, our son raises some pumpkins and it's kind of fall. Maybe we could put pumpkins in the back of a trailer. So they pulled a trailer up and it was full of pumpkins. And we talked them into opening the tailgate and saying pumpkins for sale. And man, they were like, you wouldn't believe it. Everybody slows down. It works.
I'm going to read this. I was just thinking if we want people to share, because most of us are from Boise, but Molly wrote something that I would love to read this. She wrote, the Portland Repair Project has done a lot of street reclaiming with art. When I lived on a busier street, we had a stroller just off the curb with a life-size doll in it. I think that's great. Oh, and Deanna, you mentioned Ann Houserath. Yeah, Ann has like this collection of objects to put out in the street. Yeah, to slow. She hung she's taught us how to hang things from our tree. And then she had this trailer that the kids at Longfellow decorated, and she'd move it around from house to house and we'd put it out in the street, and it did slow traffic down. It was great. Those are great ideas.
My next door neighbor, or 2 doors down, has a blow up unicorn, and they have this something hanging around its neck, and they change it all the time. So people are slowing down to, what is the unicorn saying today?
I love that. I got to come see that.
It's great. It's great. So I hung up, we had this old 50th anniversary Wizard of Oz blow up balloon. And it has the little, you know, basket hanging from it with everyone in it. So I hung it on my front porch for a while. I'll probably put it back out. We've just all been hanging stuff out.
That's great. Well, what a great discussion. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add? This has been really fun today. It's been great. Thank you, Deanna, Deborah, and Sarah for your wonderful presentations, really inspiring.